Welcome back to our discussion. And in today's video, we'll be talking about ethical issues on qualitative data analysis. So before you conduct your qualitative methods, before you can analyze your qualitative data, there are of course ethical issues that needs to be considered, and that is what we are going to talk about in this particular chapter. Okay? So, of course, we cannot focus only on the quality of the knowledge we are producing, especially when we are conducting our research, as if its truth were all that counts. But instead, we must also consider the potential wrongness of our actions as qualitative researchers in relation to the people whose lives we are studying, to our colleagues, and to those who sponsor our work. So that's why we need to consider some of the ethical issues in conducting qualitative researches as a qualitative researcher, excuse me. And all researchers must be guided by the classic principle of humane conduct. And what is that? First, do no harm. Okay? In any kinds of research, this is the principle. Do no harm. And any responsible qualitative researcher ponders moral and ethical questions such as, is my project uh, really worth doing? Yung research nyo ba ay talagang karapat-dapat na gawin at tapusin? Am I exploiting people with my research? Okay? Ginagamit ko ba yung mga tao sa paligid ko sa aking study? Do the respondents have a right to see my report? Okay? What good is anonymity of people and their colleagues can easily recognize themselves in my report? And so on and so forth. These are some of the questions that will be considered in uh, before conducting qualitative data gathering and analysis. So the intention of this particular lecture is that at the end of it, you will be able to discuss some considerations when making an agreement with the study participants. Number two is to identify some ethical issues in qualitative data analysis and explain its implication to analysis. And finally, that you will be able to pinpoint some conflicts and dilemmas in qualitative data analysis. Let's begin with the agreements with study participants. Okay, so usually before you conduct a research, the participant and you as researchers need to reach at some agreement. So kakausapin niyo muna sila, di ba? About what you would like to accomplish in your study. And the main issue is that we would like to build with the study participants that will maintain and improve the quality of your analysis as well. Okay? And of course, in the first place, dapat magkakaroon tayo dito ng tinatawag nating meta agreement. What is meta agreement? Meta agreement is actually a general agreement between the two parties, you as the researcher or the researchers, as well as the study participant. Okay? And dito pag-uusapan ninyo, number one, yung tinatawag nating both ba the researcher and the participant will share their stories. Si participant ba at si researcher magsasalita pareho? Okay? Number two is that si participant ba will participate on a certain problem, okay? A certain issue rather that has to be solved in a certain community, or hindi, or the usual na ginagawa, the traditional one, which is the participant always do the talking, especially in the interview. Okay, those are some of the considerations when we are talking about uh, agreement or meta agreement with our study participants. But whatever the basic relationship doon sa pag-agrihan ninyo, okay, there are some matters of course that needs to be clarified with the participants. O, kasi baka nag-expect sila something in return from you, okay? O kaya baka meron kayong ibibigay sa kanila na nag-expect sa sila. So it has to be settled in that particular study manner because it affects your analysis. Okay? And here are some of the questions actually that needs to be considered as an element on your agreement, okay, with the study participant. Number one is how much time and effort will be involved? Gaano ba katagal ang involvement ng inyong mga participants sa study nyo? Would it be a day only, an hour only? Would it be a semester, a year, 3 years? Pag yung longitudinal, ibig sabihin matagal na study, and so on. Number two is, what kind of data collection is involved? Pag-uusapan nyo rin yan. Is it in observation? Okay, pupunta ba kayo doon mismo sa kanila at mag-observe? Mag-i-interview ba kayo sa kanila? Are you going to do journal writing or life stories, narration? Okay. Number three is participation voluntary or mandatory? So it has to be settled as well. And number four, who will design and steer the study? Sino ang magmamaniobra ng study? Oh, of course, there are some studies which are funded by certain organizations or some groups, okay, when you conduct your study. Kung funded ba yon, sila ba yung magmamanipulate ng study ninyo or hindi? Or kayo ba mismo? Something like that. And number five, will material from participants be treated confidentiality? Of course, you know the answer. And number six, will participants' anonymity be maintained? I know that you also know the answer. And who will produce descriptive and explanatory product? Sino ba? Is it the participants or the funders or you as the researcher? Okay? Or third party? Meron pa yon. And number eight, will participants review and critique interim and final products? Because there are sometimes again, it depends on the agreement. Okay? It depends on the agreement and the type of research you are conducting. Okay? The type of qualitative data you are getting to your participants. That's why it is imperative that you sit down with your participants and discuss all these things with them. Okay? And finally, what benefits will amass to both participants and researchers? O kasi baka may in-expect sila after and kaya sila sumama sa sa research study ninyo, sa study ninyo ay dahil meron silang matatanggap na ayuda. Baka bibigyan sila ng isang kabang bigas. Baka bibigyan sila ng 500 pesos or something like that. Okay? So those are some of the questions that you needed to consider when you make your agreements with study participants. Now, let's proceed with the ethical issues. Okay, so what are those ethical issues that you need to consider in your analysis? And let's see what are these ethical issues and let's try to see what are their implications to your analysis later on. Okay, so of course we know that most professions have well-defined codes of ethics. Kami, sa teachers, when I was in secondary, of course we follow the code of ethics for professional teachers. Okay? And you, as well as political scientists later on, you follow as well a set of code of ethics. Okay? Which includes, of course, guidelines on how you're going to conduct your research, or how you're going to treat your respondents or your participants in that same way. Okay? Now, so the first ethical issue that we would like to consider in qualitative data analysis is the worthiness of the project, the value of the project. Okay? So you might ask yourself, is my contemplated study worth doing? Dapat ba itong tapusin, gawin? And will it contribute in some significant way to a domain broader than my funding, my publication opportunities, and my career? Okay, ginagawa ko lang ba ito dahil gusto ko lang magkaroon ng funding, gusto ko lang mapapublish, meron lang akong may publish, and so on. And is it congruent with values important to me? Ito ba, tugma ba ito dun sa kinalakhan kong values, or sa values na tinuturo sa amin sa eskwelahan, sa values na tinuturo sa amin sa bahay, and so on and so forth. Okay? And in general, a study is only opportunistic without a larger significance or real meaning to you. So, dapat talaga alam mo yung value ng study nyo. Kasi, bakit? It's likely to be pursued in a shallow way with less care devoted to design, data collection, and data analysis. So, kapag kayo gagawa kayo ng thesis ninyo, of course, you see to it that your study is the research that you'd like to study really. Okay? Hindi yung napilitan lang kayo dahil no choice na kayo. Because mayroong effect yun sa analysis, di ba? As well as in the data collection. Okay? And number 2 is, of course, competence. O yan. So, you ask yourself, do I have the expertise to carry out a study of good quality? Or yung colleagues ko ba, kasama ko sa thesis, meron ba kaming enough knowledge and competence to write quality research? Or dahil baguhan kayo, di ba? Am I prepared to study and be supervised, trained, and consulted with? Okay? Meron ba akong malalapitan dahil nga baguhan pa kami? Meron ba kami mahihingan ng tulong, ng advices on the conduct of our study? Now, why do we need to consider competence? Of course, an acknowledged incompetence is responsible for a certain pattern of analytic weakness in qualitative studies. Tandaan yan. Why? Because there is a possibility that you will accumulate large amounts of poorly collected and analyzed data drawing shallow and quick analysis. So, tawag nito, kapag hindi nyo gusto, wala kayo na pagtanungan, walang nag-guide sa inyo, especially kayong mga baguhan kayo sa thesis ninyo, of course, malaking possibility na mamamali yung makukuha nyong data, yung data na magagather nyo is not valid and reliable as well. When it comes to the analysis, this is my experience because I've been sitting down in thesis presentations by my students in RTU. So I noticed that my advisor, but the advisor does not give insights and guidance to the students. So, pagdating sa analysis sa chapter 4, doon nagkakatalo-talo. Because nagkakamali-mali sila sa data. Number 1, sa data na na-collect. Hindi nagja-jive doon sa dapat na i-collect na data. And then sa analysis, hindi rin nagtutugma. And so that's why we need to consider competence. Number 3 is informed consent. O yan, importante yan. When you do conduct your qualitative data, because we know that especially in qualitative data, we involve people, especially in political science, di ba? We ask ourselves, do the people I am studying have full information about what the study will involve? Tama ba yung tao na aking mapapagtanungan, na may interview about dun sa particular issue na gusto kong i-study? Okay? Is there consent to participate freely given? Oh, especially kapag mga below, mga minors pa. Oh, pag parents o kapag mga adults naman na yan, or ano na yan, are they willingly giving their participation, or sila ba ay napilit or hindi pinilit? Ganon. Okay? Of course, because it has something to do, it will affect your analysis as well. Okay? Especially for the children, pinakabata, di ba? So, dapat nai-inform yung mga magulang. Sa bahay niyo yung kakandak yan, yung study ninyo. The teachers, the administrators, if that's for the school. Okay? And we know that what is its implication in the analysis? Weak consent usually leads to poor data because respondents will try to protect themselves in a mistrusted relationship or one formed with the researcher by superiors only. So, dapat meron tayong informed consent na sinasabi ninyo, these are the kayo ba ay willing sa aming study. Kaya sa pag-gather ng data, dapat meron kayo doon checklist na sila ay willing mag-participate sa study ninyo. Okay? Because it has something to do as well with the analysis of data. And the number 4 is the benefits, costs, and reciprocity. Okay? So, ask yourself, what do participants have to invest in time, energy, or financial resources? Okay? Sila ba ay magbe-benefit? Sila ba ay maglalabas ng pera? Okay? Ano yung level ng resources na ibibigay nila sa inyo? Okay? And then at the same time, on both sides, ano yung magiging benefit? Okay? Pantay ba yung benepisyo na matatanggap ng researcher at ng participant of the study? Why? Because the study participants' concern about the inequity of benefits and costs serves to jeopardize access and thin out data. Halimbawa, pag kailangan mo ng tawag nito, advice from a political science professor, an expert. Okay? So, hindi nyo na-lay down ng maayos yung benefits niya na matatanggap. Okay? And then the cost, and then reciprocity rather. Okay? It has, of course, yung gusto nyong malaman, medyo titipirin niya kayo, di ba? Hindi niya kayo matasagot ng maayos. Kasi hindi niyo na i-lay down ng maayos yung benefits niya. Okay? That's why doon sa informed consent, ini-inform nyo na yan sila. Sinasabi nyo sa kanila yan na ito, pag nag-participate ka, these are your benefits, ito yung mga gagawin mo. As well as sinasabi dyan sa informed consent, yung harm and risk. Okay, kasama dyan. Why? Because what might this study do to hurt people involved? Okay, especially kapag scientific. Well, of course, sa inyo naman sa political science, wala naman kayong mangyayari dyan na experimental method. Okay? So, of course, again, we would like to consider harm and risk in our analysis. Okay? And number 6 is honesty and trust. Kasama yan. What's my relationship with the people I'm studying? Ka-close ko ba sila? Or hindi ko sila kakilala? Okay, are you telling the truth? Do we trust each other? Especially pag hindi mo kakilala, di ba? Mapagkatiwalaan ka kaya niya? Especially if the issues are sensitive. Mapagkakatiwalaan ka kaya niya when you ask him or her about a particular issue. Okay? Because if people feel betrayed by you when they read a report, it becomes almost impossible for them to accept it as a reasonable interpretation of what happened. Especially na pag natapos na yung interview ninyo, di ba? Kung natapos na yung interview ninyo, yung research ninyo, tapos nilathala ninyo, na-publish. And then sometime, naka-reach doon sa participants ninyo. And they found out na nagsinungaling kayo. Of course, may repercussion yon sa integrity ninyo as the researcher. And of course, doon sa analysis ninyo, as the findings ninyo. Okay? And we also have privacy, confidentiality, and anonymity. Kasama to sa mga ikinoconsider natin. We do ask questions like, in what ways will the study intrude? Okay, come closer to people than they want. How will information be guarded? How identifiable are the individuals and organizations studied? To what extent lang yung information na ibibigay nila sa inyo? Diba? Because we know that we have this Data Protection Act. So how are you going to handle, okay, their privacy, their confidentiality and anonymity, especially for sensitive issues? O halimbawa dun sa politics. Halimbawa may whistleblower doon na nagsumbong na itong isang politiko nagbigay ng pera dun sa isang barangay, nag-vote buying. At you as an researcher, nalaman mo yung gano'n, di ba? Na meron palang ganong nangyari. Tapos, ipinublish mo yung research mo without hiding the anonymity of that person who mentioned it. O, so ngayon, pwedeng balikan nung politiko yung participants mo because of that. Pwede silang makasuhan. Okay? Maging libel. So, we need to consider that as well in our data analysis because it will affect your analysis because the center of your study are the participants. Okay? And of course, having said that, another ethical issue to be considered is your research integrity and quality. Okay? So, maayos ba yung pagkakakandak ko ng study? Tugma ba yung research design na ginamit ko? Valid ba yung research instruments na ginamit namin? Yung terms ba? Okay? Maayos ba? Na-establish ba namin yung mga dapat na ma-establish? And so on and so forth. Ganon. Because if you have not attended to the soundness, yung integrity and quality of your study, of course, it has repercussions in terms of intellectual grounds. Okay? Kasi baka tapos pinublish mo. So, ikikritik nila yan, nasaan yung research integrity nito? Baka dinoktor mo lang yung mga findings. Sinasabi mo na merong ganito na wala naman talaga. Okay? That is number 8. And number 9 is ownership of data and conclusions or analysis. So, sino ang kanina mapupunta? Yung field notes ninyo, yung analysis ninyo. Sa inyo ba as the researcher? Sa organization nyo ba? Sa participants nyo ba? Or mismong sa funders ninyo? Kung merong nagpa-fund ng inyong research. Okay? And kung malaman mo na kung kanina yon, sino ngayon ang kokontrol ng distribution? Okay? Sino ang kokontrol ng distribution? You, as the researcher, yung participants din ba, your funders, and so on and so forth. Because we need to be certain that all ownership agreements are specified in writing before data are collected. Why? Because there will be potential risks to respondents if the data fall into the wrong hands. Malay mo dun sa mga criminal mapunta yung mga data na nag-gather ninyo. So we need to be careful with that. Kaya papangalagaan natin yung number 7, our participants' privacy, confidentiality, and anonymity. And finally is the use and the misuse of results. Okay? The use and misuse of results. You ask yourself, Do I have an obligation to help my findings to be used appropriately? Okay? Magagamit ba itong findings ng study ko for a certain issue or hindi? Okay? What if your study is misused, nagamit against, okay, against sa, let's say, sa politics. So, nag-research kayo about sa life ni Bongbong Marcos. Pasensya na kung si Bongbong Marcos lagi binabanggit ko, ha. Tawag nito, kasi yun ang trending, di ba, lagi. And then, marami kayong natutunan sa kanya, marami kayong nalaman about sa kanya, na-research ninyo. And then, when you publish it, of course, will it be helpful or will they use this one as an attack to that person? Okay? So, yun kasi yung kino-consider natin. So, check your findings regularly with the people you're researching to discuss the broader implications and ramifications. So, kailangan pinag-uusapan natin yan at yan sa mga kino-consider ninyo. Tignan ninyo kung yung research ninyo ay magagamit sa kabulastugan o kalokohan or magagamit para sa kabutihan. Okay? And finally, we will talk about conflicts, dilemmas, and trade-offs in qualitative research. Number 1 is a scientific understanding versus individual rights. Ito, it has been written because before time, di ba sa especially pag experimental studies, we would like to say, for example, would like to know the cause of Alzheimer's disease. So, ano na matatanda without their consent, pinahirapan sila na violate ang kanilang individual rights. That's one conflict. Okay? And then validity versus avoiding harm, especially dun sa result ninyo. So, minsan may nag-gather kayong data and then you'd like to validate it by asking people who knows well about that particular data. And since, say for example, yung taong yun umiiwas lang, diba, ayaw niya mapahamak because napaka-sensitive ng data, ng result na meron kayo. So, may mga ganun. Another one is detached inquiry versus help. Yung tinatawag nating nag-study lang kayo because mayroon lang kayong gustong malaman about people's behavior on some political, say for example, aspects, and then nakita ninyo na, uy, itong magsasaka pala, itong mga grupo ng magsasaka, dahil pala nilang kailangan. Okay? And another one with that particular manner is help giving versus confidentiality. O, yan. So, tawag nito, dahil sa kagustuhan ninyo, based on your findings, on your research, sa gustuhan ninyong matulungan yung taong yung mga yon, group of people probably, nakalimutan nyo na yung kanilang confidentiality kasi pinablish nyo yung kanyang study. That's another dilemma or issue or conflict. And of course, freedom of inquiry versus political advantage. Diba? Kagaya ng halimbawa, minsan, halimbawa, doon na lang sa Davao City, sabi nila natin, di ba? May mga gustong mag-motorcade doon kasi gustong mapulsuhan ng tao kung papatok ba yung mga ilang kandidato, yung mga presidential votes doon sa Davao City. But because Mayor Sara prohibited the conduct of motorcade or political campaign in their city, so hindi nga rin nakapag-conduct ng rally doon yung mga candidates of different parties. Okay? So those are the conflicts, dilemmas, and trade-offs in conducting qualitative data analysis. So this ends my presentation. I'd like to keep my presentation as short and simple as possible. Okay, so I will see you in the next chapter. Goodbye and God bless you all.